Hello, everybody. It's me again, Diana Arellano, member of the Diversity ACM SIGGRAPH Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Before we begin with the next session, I would like to remind you that this live stream is moderated by ACM SIGGRAPH. We ask that all comments stay respectful of others and respect ACM's policy against harassment. This means to exercise consideration and respect in your speech and actions, refrain from demeaning, discriminatory, or harassing behavior and speech, and be mindful of your fellow participants. No intimidating, harassing, abusive, discriminatory, derogatory, or demeaning speech or actions by any participant will be tolerated. So I have the pleasure to introduce now Celia Hodent, who will be talking today about unconscious bias and inclusion. Celia holds a PhD in psychology and has over 15 years of experience in the entertainment industry. She currently leads an independent consultancy, conducts workshops, and provides guidance on the topics of game UX, ethics, unconscious bias, and tech inclusion. Celia is author of The Gamer's Brain, and I had the pleasure to be at her FMX talk a few years ago where I was just mind blown, and it's an honor for me to be here with you today.
Thank you
So,
so much.
Celia, over to you.
Thank you. And I hope that everybody is doing well. I know it's very complicated times and hope you're staying safe. I live in California, so it's also very complicated here with the fires. So I hope everybody is doing okay. I have a bunch of slides to show you. So let me see if I can make this work. Um, okay, so we're going to talk about cognitive biases and inclusion. And yes, I have a PhD in psychology, and I've been working in the game industry for over 12 years now. And my question to you is, have you ever tried to pull a door that needed to be pushed? That happens if you see a handle on the door, and despite the big sign saying push, we see the handle and we can't help ourselves. We grab it and we pull. This is how we are influenced by our environment, and this is what user experience is all about. It's considering how, as humans, we are going to interact with an environment, whether it is an object, a system, or service, or a video game, and so ensure that we're going to design these environments in the way that's going to fit human factors and human interaction. So this is what we do, and I'm just going to explain to you a little bit how this works. Because an experience happens in people's minds, like playing a video game or watching a movie, we need to understand a little bit better how the brain works and how it learns and how we interact with the environment so that we can take that into account when we create something. So I'm just going to show you very briefly how it works when we learn. This is a very simplified illustration of what's going on in the brain when we process information, for example. So it always starts with our perception. We perceive stuff from the environment gathered by our senses, and we have way more than five senses that are shown here, but it's just for the sake of simplicity. So we gather all the information from our senses, then we're going to process the information, and if we learn something new, that's what's going to happen is going to change something physically in our memory. We have synapses that are connections between neurons that are modifying with our interaction with the environment. So anything that you do, whether it is playing a video game, watching a movie, listening to me right now, it is modifying your brain. And between perception and a change in a memory, there's a lot of factors that can influence the quality of the information processing or the quality of learning. You have physiological factors. If it's the morning for you right now, you didn't have coffee yet, it's going to be harder for you to pay attention. Or if you're tired, you didn't sleep well, same thing. Here I'm going to mostly talk about attention because attentional resources are really important when you process information. We know that when we pay attention to something more, we're going to retain it more and so learn better. So again, this is a very simplified version of what's going on in the brain. We don't have these independent buckets like these. It's really just highly simplified for the sake of the demonstration. But I'm going to show you the main limitation of our brain in terms of perception, memory, and attention so that we can explain a little bit why that matters with inclusion. So bear with me. So I'm going to show you a little illustration here. Try to figure out at home or wherever you're watching what this represents to you. What do you perceive in this image? When I do that live, I usually get about maybe, depending on my audience, but if I'm talking to game developers, I will get around 30% of people super excited and shouting Street Fighter characters. And this is indeed a representation of Street Fighter characters in an artistic way. But a lot of people don't recognize these characters, maybe because you did not play that game, you don't know anything about this game, or you did play a little bit or know it a little bit, but not enough to really have a strong recognition of this image. Or some people see DNA or rugs or Lego blocks. And so all of this is just to say that perception is subjective. And if you're colorblind, like about 8% of the male population, you are also currently excluded from this example. And I apologize for that. It's just a reminder for everyone to never use colors only to convey information. So our perception is subjective. It is a construct of the brain. We have a reality out there. There's one reality, but we all have a different perception of it depending on our background, our knowledge, our expectation, our culture, etc., etc. And so this is one thing that we have to take into account. Now let's play a little game. I hope you all know the sculpture, The Thinker from Auguste Rodin, Le Penseur. So it's the guy is real thinking really very hard and is seated. And I would like you to try to remember on which leg or legs lay which arm or arms of the thinker. So try to think about it a little bit. Usually people tell me it's got the right arm on the left leg, or vice versa, or the right arm on the right leg. So people are trying to figure it out, and so I'm going to show you the answer. He actually has both arms on the left leg, and most of us don't remember that. We remember it approximately, but we don't have a clear image of the penseur unless you're an artist and you copied it, or I don't know, you really love this sculpture for some reason. In that case, you have a better memory of it. But most of the time, our memory is properly flawed. We don't take pictures that we're going to store somewhere, or recordings that we're going to store somewhere in our mind, in our brain. And when we need to remember that, we bring that back to consciousness. This is not how it works, and our memory is actually pretty flawed and very fallible. So it's hard to just rely on our memory. Last little game, I'm going to show you cards. I'm going to ask you to choose one card and try to remember it as accurately as possible. Let's go pretty fast. So pick a card. Now I bet I can guess which card you picked and make it disappear. Ta-da! So I hope this works. I don't get the feedback from the audience in these e-versions of talks, but hopefully it worked for you where you were watching. And if it did, know that I've changed all the cards, and this is how I made the magic trick work. This is what magicians do. It's called misdirection in magic. We misdirect attention so that we change stuff, and people usually don't see a thing. In psychology, it's a very strong phenomenon called change blindness. We are not paying attention to all the things that's going on in our environment. So things can change, and pretty big changes can happen, and sometimes we don't even notice them. And so our attention is scarce. So this is just like very briefly, just to show you that even though we have a very great capabilities with our brain, our perception is subjective, our attention is scarce, and our memory is fallible. This is among the biggest brain biases that we have. And so this is why we need a UX approach, because it's all about thinking about how people are going to use an environment and knowing these biases, knowing that we go straight to where we want to go, even if the design is showing something different. This is what user experience is all about. And to get to my point, the lack of inclusion in the tech industry is also a systemic issue. It's also a problem with the design of the system. We really didn't think how humans are going to use the system. We didn't really anticipate cognitive biases. And this can be tackled using the same UX mindset that we use to make better games. But why do we care about diversity? It's sometimes, it's a question that people don't even ask themselves anymore because it's just the right thing to do. But it's still really important to remember, everyone, why it's important. So I'm going to show you a video. I'm not sure if it's going to work. It's probably going to work, but not the sound. So if that happens, I'm just going to tell you what happens with the sound. But it's showing a person with a dark skin tone trying to use a soap dispenser. So it's not working. working with a napkin, but not with a pen. So I don't know if you've heard the video, but they're laughing because they found it pretty stupid that if you have a darker skin tone, this doesn't work. The problem in this condition, in this situation, it can be funny, but this is the same situation for example, health devices. And what is showing is when we design something, if we just test it and tinker around with it with the people who designed it, and all these people are just white people, then we're not going to see this problem. We have a lot of blind spots, and it's normal. We all have them. But if we lack diversity on our teams, this is what's going to happen. We are not going to be able to anticipate how other people that don't look like us or have different culture or different expectations or needs are going to use the devices. And so this is why we need diversity and inclusion, because if you have diversity but the diverse people on your team don't have a voice and cannot make decisions, then it's not useful. So beyond the the main brain flaws that we talked about earlier, we have a lot of what we call cognitive biases. These are biases that we don't um, really realize that we have. Most of them are implicit, that make us make bad decisions, and we don't even realize that. So the idea here is not to really read all of them. The idea is just, I hope that you feel overwhelmed by all the elements that are on the slides, because we have a lot of these cognitive biases. And these are going to impact our decision making. I'm going to show you an example of how one of these biases or a few of these biases can express themselves. And an illustration that was made by Dan Ariely in his studies. So this is taken from a subscription from a magazine, and it was back in the day when print was still something. So it's probably like 15 years ago. And there were three options. It was an advertisement to get a subscription for a magazine. You could have the web subscription only for 1 year, and that was $59. You could get the print subscription only for a year for $125, and you could have both print and web for $125 as well. So Don Ariely found that interesting, that there's an option, the print subscription only. Who's going to pick that option? And so he did a study with it, and he asked participants to choose with these three options which one they would pick. And most people in this situation are taking print and web subscription for 84%, and no one is taking print subscription only option. So Danarially removed that option because since no one is using it, and did another study and asked other participants to choose between these two options. In this case, most participants pick the web subscription. So this is showing you how the environment, how things are framed, how things are shown. You know, what is the context? What options do we have? What choices do we have? This is impacting our decision making. This is called the decoy effect. Um, and we are not rational when we make decisions. We believe we are, but we are not. And the environment is influencing what we do and what we decide, and we are not aware of it. From the book Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist and won the Nobel Prize in economics. And he's explaining that the brain has two modes of thinking. It's two systems, so to speak. You have system one is fast, automatic, effortless. That's a system that we use most of the time during our day because we can't really pay attention to all the little things. We have to make countless decisions all day long. So this is the thing that you do, like in the morning. You have like your routines. You know, you already know what you're gonna do. You know, brush your teeth, you're gonna take a shower, get coffee. Or if I ask you if you're a native English speaker and I ask you 3 times 6, the answer 18 is popping in your mind immediately because you had learning to learn all the multiplication table, and so now it's automatic. You don't even have to think about it. That's system one. You have also system two. This is the system that we're going to use when we have to solve more complex problems or make conscious decisions. And this one is slow, controlled, effortful. So if I ask you 32 times 18, you're more likely to have to stop and think about it, and you'll see that it's going to take you some effort. And actually, this is taking a lot of energy, because the brain, even though it's quite small as compared to the rest of the body, is consuming a lot of energy. So we're only going to use system 2 when it's really important for us, and most of the time we're going to use system 1. We're going to rely on this fast, automatic, and effortless system. The problem is, this is where our biases lie. And if we're not aware of that, we're just going to keep making decisions that we believe are rational, that are not, and just influenced by the context and the environment. Think of this just like perceptive illusions. So in this illustration, the squares A and B are actually of the exact same color, exact same tone. Now, if I remove the rest of the picture, now you can still see it very clearly, but otherwise we're just falling for this trap. It's a perceptive illusion. And I bring this back, and it's just as if you didn't learn anything. Even if you know that this is an illusion, you can't you are still falling for it. So cognitive biases is pretty much the same thing. Even if we know that these biases exist, we're still going to fall for them most of the time, because we are tired and we don't pay attention, and we can't rely on our system to all day long. This is just not possible. And so here's an example of how it's impacting our society. This is called the Linda problem, and it's described in Daniel Kahneman's book. Imagine Linda. She's 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was very deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti nuclear demonstrations. What do you think is more likely? That Linda is a bank teller, or that Linda is a bank teller and is active in a feminist movement? If you reply to that Linda is more likely that Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement, you fell for the conjunction fallacy. Of course, it's always less likely to be two things rather than just one. So if we just think about statistics, it's always going to be more likely to be one thing than two. But because of the context, because we explain that she's a feminist and she's been active and blah blah blah, for us we're gonna stop thinking about logic and statistics and fall for this bias. And in this study, 85% of respondents fell for this bias. So this is pretty strong, and this is called the representativeness heuristic. This is one of the mental shortcuts that we use, because we can't always think deeply about every little decision that we make. And when we have to make judgments without, a lot of certainty, we're just gonna fall for that, and we're gonna think about what in the same situation, what's happening, and what are these women that we know, what do they do? And this is how we fall for stereotypes instead of thinking rationally. Here are a few other examples. We have what we call the in-group bias. This is a tendency to give preferential treatments to others that we perceive as belonging to our own group. For example, I'm white, I'm a woman, I love video games. And so I'm going to identify better with people who look like me, and probably going to feel more comfortable with people who have the same background and the same culture. And it's just nothing I can do about that. I can be conscious of it, and make sure that if I hire people, I'm not going to fall for this bias. But this is a bias that I have, and we all have it, and we need to understand it. Another example is the halo effect. That's the spilling over positive and negative traits from one personality area to another. Let's say you know that one person in your team has done a great job, did a great job like maybe a year ago. And so now you have this imprinted in your mind. And even if a few months ago there were problems and you had people like speaking out because they were not feeling comfortable with that person, it's going to be hard for you to think that, okay, now we have a problem, because you still have the memory of that person did a great job a year ago, and so that person should be great all over. Same thing if someone did something that wasn't great, you're always going to have that in the back of your mind. Our memory is fallible, and we're also not going to have a great memory of everything. So if that person did something great and you love that person because of the Ingroup bias, you're not going to memorize all the little things that person did not do that well, or the things that person did that made other people uncomfortable. Here's a comic strip representing what can happen, especially with the in-group bias during interviews. Let's say you want to hire for diversity, so you have a big pool of participants, and through the CVs, they all look great, so you invite four of them, and you proceed to the interview, and the interview goes well for all of them. But the fourth one, that person went to the same school as you did. This, without you even realizing it, is going to make you feel more comfortable with this person. And this is how we end up hiring people that look like us, are coming from the same background, even though we say we want to be diverse. And then we're gonna justify this decision just by saying, "Oh, that person had a better CV. It's not, I just hired the best person for the job," because it's very uncomfortable for us to think that we were biased in this situation. But this happens, and we need to be aware of that. And so there are some studies that are showing that, for example, I mostly talk about the difference between men and women because I'm a woman, so it's easier for me to talk about. But for men and women are interviewed, and for the same situation, a man is going to be felt as modest, resolute, like a leader, seems competent, but had a day enough day with the test if he made some mistakes in the test. Whereas a woman is going to be felt as unassertive, arrogant, aggressive, and she didn't really she failed a little parts of the test, or she's not 100% competent. And again, these are biases, and if we don't change the environment, like have a very standardized process so that we don't fall for these biases, no matter how hard we try to not fall for these biases, we are going to fall for them because they are implicit. And on top of that, Danielle Kahneman is explaining that people who are cognitively busy are also more likely to make selfish choices, use sexist language, and make superficial judgments in social situations. System two is requiring a lot of energy. So if you're already using a lot of energy in your day, and we know in tech and in video games and in all these jobs, we are doing a lot of crunch time, and it's very demanding jobs, and so we are going to be very cognitively busy, and so we are even more likely to fall for these biases. And the problem is that we have that cognitive dissonance, which is another problem that I mentioned briefly before. It's hard for us to say, I hired the white guy because that person, I felt just more comfortable, and that person comes from the same school. Even if this is what happens unconsciously, we are not likely to say this is what happened. We're going to say, I hired the best person for the job, because it's really hard to keep in our mind conflicting attitudes, beliefs, or behavior. If I believe in diversity, I don't want to believe that I hired the white person that looked like me because I was more comfortable. So I want to justify this behavior. So when you have this dissonance, it's producing a feeling of mental discomfort, leading to an alteration of one of the attitudes, belief, or discomfort to reduce the discomfort and restore balance. So I'm going to say, no, I didn't hire that person because he was coming from the same background. I hired him because he was the best person for the job, and we believe in it, and that's the problem. We really strongly believe in it. So we have to take that into account and to change the environment. And this is what happens most of the time. A lot of people believe that they're welcoming, and they say, "Hey, come over. We want diversity," but they didn't see that they shaped the environment so that those people can actually. It's really hard for them to reach out and to become part of the group. And we have to understand what are these obstacles in the environment. If we really want more diversity and inclusion, we have to tackle this environment. We have to change the environment to make it more inclusive. And so, if humans are so biased, can AI help us go against them? We know that there's a lot of problem with AI. So I'm going to show you an example from Google Translate back in 2018. In Turkish, there's no gender. So if you want to translate "he is a doctor" or "she is a doctor," you're going to have the same phrase. And pardon my Turkish, I don't speak Turkish. You're going to have the same phrase, "o bir doctor," because we don't have any gender in Turkish. But now, if you take the phrase "o bir doctor" in Turkish, in English back then, it would be translated "he is a doctor." Now, if you take the phrase in Turkish about nurse o bir hemşire, you get she is a nurse. So the gender is back, and it's perpetuating the biases that we have. AI is fed by our biases. So if we don't, again, if we don't really clearly understand those biases, if we're going to have the exact same problem with AI, it's going to be even more powerfully perpetuated. So it can be concerning to use AI to parse CVs. What we need to do is to understand these biases and understand how they are expressed in the environment so that we can redesign this environment so that we can change our behavior. One example of that was orchestras in the US. They found that there were a lot of men hired in orchestras. So could it be that just men are better musicians? What they did is instead of thinking that, they changed the environment during auditions. They put a curtain, and so these were blind auditions. And after they did that, in some cases, and still debated, but there were from 30 to 55% more women hired in orchestras. And they have to iterate because apparently with the hardwood floors, you can still hear the high heels of some women. And so they added a carpet also to make it better. So this is what it's we have to think about. We have to think about how the environment is making us fall for biases. If we know that we have in front of us a woman or a man or different ethnicities, and these are people that we don't share the same background, we are going to influence by that. And if we don't want to be influenced by in the Ingroup bias, we have to find ways to change the environment so that we don't fall for that. Another more comical example was from Amsterdam airport. Instead of trying to ask people to please, keep the place clean and clean after yourself, someone had the idea to put a sticker of a fly next to the drain. And turns out that you guys are pretty playful because they were like minus 80% in urinal spillage after that person did that. And so again, instead of telling people, hey, don't do this, hey, push this door, try to redesign the environment so that people naturally are going to do the things that we want them to do. And in that case, we want to hire and to promote people for diversity and inclusion. So to conclude, I know that I'm covering a lot of stuff, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but the idea was just to make you understand that it's actually not just saying we want to be more inclusive and diverse is not enough. We need to really bust all the barriers that we created without us really realizing it, um, that is preventing this diversity from happening. So designing for inclusion is not only the right thing to do humanly, it's also good business. You're going to reach a broader audience, so we absolutely need to do it. To design for inclusion, you need diversity and inclusion on your teams so that you can counter all the blind spots that we have. And you need expertise to be able to do that, to understand all these cognitive biases, all these social biases, how they are expressed, and how we can change the environment for that. So we need to combat these biases. And for example, your hiring and promotion processes. How can you make the hiring process more blind? How can you make sure that the promotion is going to be fair? Because we're going to remember things maybe more vividly if it's someone that we like that's coming from our own group. So we should not rely on memories. We should have a very strong and standardized process for hiring and promotion so that we don't are going to be influenced by these biases and that the situation is going to be fair. But we also need to understand that even beyond that, there are some barriers in our environment that is also making it harder for some people to get there. So we also need to counterbalance all these problems so that we can make sure we have more people, diverse people on our teams. And remember, we can't control these biases, so we need to change the environment instead. But again, this is not just that. We also need to understand that it's harder for certain population to get there. So we need to also counterbalance and make it fair and break down these all these barriers. And in the meantime, make sure that we make things better for everyone. So think of it as we have a box and as it's unfair and the system is making it easier for some people to grow and be hired and be successful. What we need to do is fix this box. Thank you so much for your attention. So, of course, I'm here to answer all of your questions. I have a bunch of resources on my blog. It's mainly about game UX, but I'm soon, probably in a month. I'm not sure if I'm going to do soonish, but I'm going to write an article about inclusion and diversity and explain all of these things that I just explained. And that's it.
Awesome. Celia, thank you very much. This was such a interesting, amusing, inspiring talk. And I think with all your examples, we have a really clear picture of what it is, which
Hopefully.
I think helps a lot, especially for those of us who are more visual
Mm,
learners. But anyway, the content was great. And I have some questions from the audience. I have to say some are from me because I was just
that's all right.
I have so many questions. But anyway, I will start with one from me. You talked about framing information, and it was the study about print and web content, right? And I was just wondering if could this type of approach, this framing information, could help convince top management about the importance of diversity. No, in the sense that many times you just have a struggle with the top
Yes.
management, no, that they don't understand why this would be important. How we can present data so
Yes.
that they can understand it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to give you one example that's pretty showing. Um, it's if you say to your top manager, "Hey, we need to make things better. We need to improve and to hire like 30% of our people to be more diverse." This is not going to have as much as an impact as if you say, "Right now we have a lot of homogeneity in our company, and we need to decide that we're not going to go beyond 70% of white men in our company." So it's if you frame it in terms of showing the bigger number, and the bigger number is for homogeneity. If you say that currently in our company we have 95% of homogeneous people, and these people have all the same blind spots, and so this is not going to make our company thrive, and this is also not good humanly to do that. So if you put the bigger number first and think about homogeneity, then it's going to help convince. This is what one of the tricks that we can do to make people understand better what's going on.
Excellent. Good. This is indeed a good advice, and I'm taking it right now. We have a question also from Lauren, and she wrote, is there a source for a set of best practices for hiring that can mitigate bias in practice? For instance, do you know of some good rubrics for either industry or academia?
Yeah, so I'm currently trying to put together all these guidelines. It's a bit difficult because I care about science, and we want to have scientifically based guidelines, and these are pretty hard to have because studying um, biases and hiring promotion process is pretty difficult. So there are a lot of resources on HBR, Harvard Business Review. So if you go on their website, they have a ton of resources on there. But some of the guidelines so I was trying to go blind, make sure that you have a test and that you have a grid. You for example, you avoid chit chat at the beginning of an interview, because if you start with chit chat, maybe you're gonna find out that that person has something in common with you, and now you're gonna be biased for the whole interview. So we want to make the person comfortable enough that, all right, interview time. But we want to avoid that sort of chit chat that is as it started from a good intentions to make the person you're interviewing comfortable, but this is likely going to induce some biases. So there are a lot of little guidelines like this. I do a workshop, and I usually present some of these guidelines, but it's hard to have a complete set of guidelines, and there are companies that are working on that. There are way more expert than me on this. I'm currently trying to gather all that, but it's also depending on your process and who you're hiring for. Do you need a test to hire that person? In that case, we have to make the test standardized, and we have to define what is a failure state and what is an okay state, because sometimes we prepare a test, but then we don't define what would be a failure to the test. And so now we are still influenced by, if the person you liked who took the test did some mistakes, we're going to be like, yes, but, and the person you didn't really like because you didn't have a good feeling, you didn't click with that person, you're going to have more scrutiny with that person, without really noticing. Also, if you review sometimes what we do in a lot of companies, everybody is doing their interview separately with a person, and then at the end of the day, we do the group discussion about this person. This is also bad because in groups we're gonna influence each other, and it's very strong. So the loudest person in the group, if that person has a strong opinion, can influence the whole group. So what you want to have is individual feedback, and that these people don't talk to each other in the corridors during the day of the interview. There's a lot of little things like that for the hiring process that can be used to improve the thing. So I'm gonna try to put all that in an article soon, but it's a bit difficult to bring all that together and make sure that is evidence based, because that's also what's very difficult in social studies to have. But these are just a few examples.
But I think these examples are a great beginning to start working on this. And we will be looking forward to your article, definitely.
No pressure. I know I'm
No,
getting a
no
little bit
pressure.
excited. I'm getting there. It's just so much stuff going on.
I believe so. I believe so. We have a question from Janet. She's asking, do you know of any examples where AI has been successfully implemented to create a more fair hiring process?
Not to my knowledge, but maybe it's so. To be fair, I haven't looked it up recently. I need to look at what's going on in AI. But the more we spot AI problems, the better they can be fixed. For example, the Google Translate example is now fixed. But the thing is, if we don't think about that beforehand, and AI, we don't know what's going on in machine learning. We know what gets in and we know what gets out, but we don't know how AI got there. And that's a problem. It's really hard to debug. So far, I actually don't have a lot of faith in AI. I don't have a lot of faith in humans as well. But we really need to understand these limitations to try to make things better. But it can be improved. But to be improved, it really needs to be carefully thought through. So maybe we'll get there, and I'll look it up for when I do my article to see if there are some better examples of AI that are kind of balancing these problems. But not super, not super. I'm a bit dubious right now.
Okay.
But I
Yeah.
would love to be proven wrong.
Yeah. I mean, things are moving forward, so who knows what is coming down the road, right?
Yes, exactly.
So,
Always no good things.
yeah. Celia, this has been a pleasure to listen to your talk, and I'm sure the audience is fascinated by all these examples. Unfortunately, we don't have more questions and more time. We do have questions, but no more time. Thank you very much. In the
You're
name of
very
the whole
welcome.
Diversity and Inclusion Committee, it's been a pleasure to have you with
Yeah.
us.